Hello everyone, here's a small little vlog video, or it might not end up being small because usually when I say I'm going to make a short video it ends up being a very long video. But I wanted to make this video in response to a comment that I got on my last video on my other channel. If you watch my other YouTube channel where I make videos of me playing computer games, a viewer left a comment, viewer by the name of John Wright, left a comment saying, thanks for providing a look back on this stuff without the anger and irony so many feel they need to add. So thank you, Mr. Wright, for this comment, and I was actually so inspired by this comment that I thought I would make a video. I was going to say a little video, but a video in response to that. I'm actually very pleased that somebody feels that way. Somebody feels that that I sort of provide perspective without irony and stuff like that. It made me think of a movement, sort of a contemporary, somewhat contemporary movement called the New Sincerity. The New Sincerity is a sort of cultural and media movement which, as far as I can tell, kind of got started in the 1980s. It seems to have its origins in Russia, and it sort of became known in the West through various authorial works. But I guess the guy who seems to be best known for it today is David Foster Wallace, the late David Foster Wallace, who of course is best known for Infinite Jest, which is a very large book, which I must confess that I didn't finish reading because it was a little too much for me. But David Foster Wallace, if you know anything about him, he's a very interesting fella. Or was a very interesting fellow when he was alive. He had a lot to say, obviously. He had a lot of ideas, was obviously a very intelligent guy. The one thing that marked his writing was that he wasn't afraid to be open, and not in the abrasive sort of way that a lot of people are. That's the thing, because a lot of people are very candid or outspoken, but in a very loud, angry, aggressive, sort of even hurtful or hateful way. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. But there's a different way to be outspoken. There is a way to be outspoken without being aggressive, without trying to attack people or trying to kind of get at people in that way. And that's kind of what the New Sincerity is about. And I don't specifically try to model myself after that. I don't specifically try to model myself after any particular cultural or literary or media movement or anything like that. I just do what comes naturally to me. But I was very pleased that one of my viewers told me that I come across as being that way, and I'm very happy about that. So I wanted to just take a moment to kind of add some comments about that, because one of the things that has marked our culture, I think, for the last several decades is the kind of bitter sarcasm that has characterized a lot of our media. It's especially noticeable in cartoons like, for example, The Simpsons was a very strong sort of point of origin for that kind of thing. Of course, it was continued with cartoons like South Park, for example. It's very visible in comic strips, like, for example, Dilbert is a prime example of that. And I'm not against that. I'm not against sarcasm or bitter irony or things like that. But the problem, I think, has become that became sort of the standard way of reacting to our society. We sort of became a society. When I say we, I mean Western society in general, so basically North America and most of Western Europe. We became sort of a culture that was attuned and trained to react to negativity or to bad experiences by being very bitter and caustic about it and commenting on it in a very sarcastic, sort of angry way, and again, kind of an ironic way, which is not necessarily bad all the time, but if that becomes our standard way of reacting to things, it becomes a form of learned helplessness. You know, in psychology you learn about the idea of learned helplessness, the idea that people or animals or whatever gradually learn that they can't do anything about their situation, and so they learn to react with helplessness. They learn to react by just saying, well, I can't do anything, so I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. And they get the feeling that maybe the best thing they can do, or the only thing they can do, is just react with a sarcastic remark like, oh yeah, that's great, yeah, I'm so happy about that. And that's kind of their standard reaction to everything bad. That becomes their reaction to anything bad that happens in the world. There's not really been a lot of very serious, sort of earnest examination of our cultural or social values in the mass media for I think several decades. Of course, there has been on occasion. I mean, there have been some movies or things like that which have attempted to really sincerely examine our cultural mindset and our cultural realities, but those have been, I think, the exception. The better part of the mass media is more about this kind of ironic, sarcastic sort of approach to social commentary. And we're kind of getting away from that. And one thing that I thought was interesting was I tend to read a lot of Slavoj Žižek just because he's one of the most wide-ranging philosophers alive in the world today. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, or even a lot of what he says, but he certainly has a lot of interesting opinions, and he's certainly thought-provoking, even if you don't always agree with him. Slavoj Žižek makes the case that in a society where irony has become the norm, then it actually becomes a subversive act to be sincere. So, it used to be the case, let's say back in the mid-20th century, maybe around the 1950s or so, when it was culturally normal to be super straight, to be super, very clean, avoid drugs, avoid alcohol, avoid sex before marriage, go to college, get a good education, get a good career, stuff like that, live in this traditional sort of nuclear family in a single-family house. I'm not saying there's anything bad about all of that, but this was kind of the norm in the mid-20th century, to be very, very sort of clean-cut in that way. That was the image that we saw in the mass media. And people reacted to that. People rebelled against that by being sort of sarcastic and caustic. And I think this is one of the impulses behind the hippie movement and the counterculture movement of the 1960s and continuing into the 1970s and beyond. People wanted to rebel against this really very square sort of lifestyle that was seen as boring and formulaic and restrictive. But the opposite became true with time. We eventually became a culture where you couldn't do the opposite. You couldn't comment on anything in a sincere way because that just wasn't cool. So it became the standard thing to do, to be so cool, man. I'm so cool that I don't take anything seriously. I don't give a fuck about anything because I'm just such a cool guy like that, and that's what cool people do. That's what that's the thing to do, just to not react to anything and just kind of distance yourself from anything and say, yeah, huh. And I guess that's okay up to a certain point, but that's not. I don't think that's kind of the mode of thinking that I want to define my social reality or my cultural reality. And I think that for most of you folks, you probably don't want to go through your whole lives approaching the world in that way either. So that's why I'm kind of glad to see that we're sort of reacting the other way now. We're kind of going back to this idea of taking ourselves seriously and taking important cultural and social and also political and environmental ideas seriously. And it doesn't mean that we have to be super serious all the time or always be super downers, always talking about big issues, and it doesn't mean we can't have fun or can't relax and can't make jokes or things like that. I mean, of course, it's good to have a sense of humor. It just means that if we're going to live well, if we want to live well, then we need to make serious efforts to do so and not just make a sarcastic, caustic kind of quip and think that that's all we can do about the problems that exist in the world. So, yeah, as usual, I have some notes which I'm reading off my computer screen. I'm improvising most of what I say, but I have some bullet points which I want to kind of just look at occasion just to make sure that I don't miss any points that I want to make. But yeah, that's basically the gist of what I wanted to say. I want to encourage everyone to be sincere. I hope that I come across that way. I don't really know how I come across when I speak, but I guess people see me as somebody who is open and honest with my opinions, and I'm glad, actually. I'm glad that I can sort of give people that feeling, or give people that sense that I somehow am a sincere person and not an ironic or sarcastic or angry sort of person. There are a lot of people like the angry video game nerd, and a lot of people who try to be like the angry video game nerd, who are just raging all the time and saying this sucks and that sucks and this is bullshit and I can't believe that this happened, and you know what, that really pisses me off. And that's amusing for a while. I mean, I enjoy watching that for 5 minutes or so, but again, it's not really it's not really what I want to define my my approach to social or cultural commentary, and I hope that you folks don't see that as a goal to, or a model, as a kind of a role model to aspire to for our approach to commenting on society as well. So yeah, I want to encourage everyone to be sincere, to 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 be candid and honest and open up about yourself when you're talking with other people. And there's a balance to this as well, of course. I mean, there is such a thing as being too outspoken. I mentioned people who are sometimes outspoken in a very aggressive, very angry, sort of in your face kind of way. Well, don't be like that. I mean, nobody likes somebody who, or maybe some people do, maybe some people find it entertaining, but in general, people don't like somebody who is always just aggressively trying to push their ideas and push their opinions and agenda onto people. That's not something you want to do. That doesn't really get you anywhere. You don't have anything to gain from that, and other people don't either. So you're not gonna do your opinions any favors if you try to advance them that way. But that doesn't mean that you should be shy or withdrawn about your opinions. It really bothers me when I see people who feel like they shouldn't talk about their opinions because they're worried about offending somebody. And I want to encourage everyone who's out there, who's listening and watching me right now. I want to say, please, folks, don't be ashamed of who you are. Don't be embarrassed or feel ashamed about your opinions. Because whatever opinions you have, you probably have some reasons for them. You must have some kind of mentality or some kind of perspectives or reasons why you think the way you do. So don't be ashamed for what you think. But the counterpoint to that then is, don't be afraid to change your opinions. And I think that's a big part of what conversation is. Conversation with other people is about exchanging ideas. I mean, when I talk to somebody, I try to listen to their ideas. I try to present to them my ideas, of course, but I also try to listen to their ideas. And if their ideas make sense to me, then I might be willing to kind of adopt some of those ideas if I think that there is a good reason to do so. So, it's kind of what conversation is, right? It's give and take. You do sometimes you talk, you do part of the talking, and you do part of the listening. So I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I think those are the main points that I wanted to say. I just want to encourage everyone to not feel like you're helpless, or like you have to just be very sort of upset and angry and always reacting angrily to everything that happens. People say that you shape your own life, you make your own life decisions, and you decide what your life is going to be. That's, of course, not entirely true. I mean, you can't do absolutely anything with your life. Not everybody can be the President of the United States. There's only one guy, or woman, maybe, probably, one person at a time who can be the President of the United States. If you want to be an astronaut and go to the moon, okay, that's a great dream, but let's be honest, not everybody's going to go to the moon in their lifetimes. So it's not true that everybody will always get exactly all the hopes and the dreams that they have in their lives. I mean, you have to be kind of realistic. So I don't like it when people say that you completely determine the course of your life, because of course you can't have anything at all that you want, but you can influence your life. You can make decisions about who you are, about how you behave, about what you do with your life, about how you talk to people and what kind of people you make friends with, and the places you go and what you do with your life. So you can steer your life to a certain degree, and I think that people should do that. I mean, of course, people should be proactive in trying to steer the course of their lives, and not just letting their lives go wherever. I mean, yeah, to a certain extent, you have to kind of let life happen because, again, you can't always decide everything's going to happen for your life. I mean, I can't just decide that I'm going to have $1 billion. I can try to work toward having that much money, but it might not happen. And even if it does, it's certainly not going to happen right away. So I can't just decide that I'm going to live in this place or have that amount of money or have that job or know those people or whatever. You know, it's not like that. But still, you can make meaningful decisions in your life. And I think one of the decisions that you should make is honestly considering your opinions and being willing to share them and adjust them as necessary. So again, I say, you know, when you're talking to somebody, you have nothing to lose by being open and saying what you think. And that, again, to qualify that, that doesn't mean, of course, that I'm always 100% the truth. You know, you have these ideas. There's always this sort of idea of the person who is too honest, who is just totally in line with the truth and just completely always saying exactly what's on their mind. Well, I'm not like that, and of course you shouldn't be like that either. I mean, if somebody's, I don't know, if somebody's wearing hideous clothes and they say, well, how do I look? How do you like my clothes? Of course, you don't want to say your clothes look terrible and you're ugly or something like that. You want to say something along the lines of, you know, I don't know if it really suits you. I mean, maybe you should try something else. You know, can kind of maybe get something else and see if that works out better. So you can say something like that. I mean, you don't have to be harsh with the truth. You don't have to be offensive or abrasive with the truth. But at the same time, you know, you don't necessarily want to say, "Wow, that's great. You know, it looks really great on you. That's like the best thing ever." There's a middle ground there. You can be honest with somebody without being offensive or hurtful or abrasive. You can tell people what you think in a way that's constructive, and you can be gentle with your words. You can choose to kind of frame the way you say things. You know, often it's not about what you say, but how you say it. And I'm not saying that I personally do that. I mean, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm an angel or something like that. I'm not saying that I always say the nicest things to people or that I do nice things for people or that I always behave in a nice way. That's certainly not true. I mean, it's kind of ironic that I'm making a video like this because I'm really the most dishonest bastard in the world. But I still think that there's value to these ideas. I still think that there's value to the idea of being forthright with your opinions when the time comes to talk. When you're in a serious discussion with somebody and they're willing to share their opinions with you, then again, you have nothing to lose and you have probably a lot to gain by just leveling with them. And that's always how it is with me. I mean, if somebody's talking to me and telling me what they think, then I'll say, okay, well, if you want to share opinions with me, then I'll tell you, here's how it is with me. Here's my perspective. This is my perspective. This is my opinion. That's my mindset. This is how I think. This is how I see things. And if you disagree with me, then I'm very willing to listen to your ideas. And if your ideas make sense to me, I might adopt some of them. And I usually try to at least understand people. Because, you know, sometimes you agree to disagree. Sometimes you might find at the end that you don't agree with the person you're speaking with. But at least you understand why they think the way they do. So you might say, well, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I think you're kind of going along the wrong path with that. I don't think you're really. I think you started with a good idea, but then didn't quite come to the same conclusion that I did. But you know, we agree to disagree. Sometimes you have to do that. But I usually at least try at the end of a conversation to at least understand why a person thinks the way they do, even if I don't fully agree with them. I think that's a good approach to take. But yeah. So yeah, everything's all about balance, right? I mean, like I said, don't be too outspoken. There is such a thing as being too outspoken. There is a time to speak and a time to not speak. You don't want to be somebody who's always just blabbing out what you think and being too outspoken with your opinions. That can be a problem. But if somebody's willing to talk and if somebody's willing to listen, then I'm always happy to talk and listen with them as well. So yeah, sincerity. Sincerity is something valuable. I think that honesty and candor and openness and sincerity and communication is something that's important. And I hope that I communicate something of that from myself. I mean, I don't know how I come across in my videos, and I know that I'm not a nice guy. I mean, sometimes I seem like a nice guy. I'm not a nice guy in real life. I mean, anybody who knows me personally knows that I'm not a nice guy, but, and I don't really see it as a goal, as a personal goal of mine to be a nice guy, but I do want to at least be honest and sincere with my opinions and perspectives that I give to people. That's, I think, to me, that's more important than just being nice and always try to make people feel better and say, oh, it's, it's so good, it's so nice, everything's okay. Oh yeah, I'm so happy, everything's going really well. Yeah, it's nice. I see that as insincere, and I don't. That's not a personal goal for me to be that way. But yeah, I do try to tell people what I think. When I'm speaking, I try to communicate what I think and what I mean in a constructive way that lets people take something away from it. So I think that's. I don't know how well I succeed, but I hope that that's something that at least I can do sometimes. So I hope that you folks have managed to do that in this video and also in other videos of mine, if you've seen some other videos of mine. And I hope that you folks will, again, not be afraid of your opinions. Don't be, like I said, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed to think what you think, because you probably have reasons for what you think. And if you get into a discussion, of course, be ready to give reasons for what you think, because people are going to ask you, okay, why do you think that way? What are the reasons for your opinion? I think that's fair. I mean, you probably should have some reasons and be able to give some reasons for why you hold these opinions. But yeah, don't be ashamed of your opinions, and be willing to kind of look at them and analyze and change them, or at least adjust them. I always encourage people to disagree with me when I speak, or not necessarily disagree with me, although that's okay as well, but I always encourage people to provide like at least a counterpoint or a contrast to what I say, because even if somebody doesn't disagree with me per se, they might see something a bit differently, in a bit of a different light from how I see it. So I always encourage people to put in additions, put in their 2 cents, and say, well, I kind of see it like this in contrast to what he was saying. I see it like this, and that's fine. You get more out of that then, because different people are adding their own sort of nuances and shades of opinion and perspective to what was said. So I think that's something very valuable in a conversation, to be able to do that. So, all right, I guess that's it for me. So, the new Sincerity. Hopefully it turns out to be something really good. Hopefully it turns out really well, and I hope that our culture moves in that direction, where we can start being more sincere with each other, and where it's not seen as dorky or nerdy to be earnest. People make fun of people sometimes for being earnest and for taking things too seriously and for being so just so. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just sometimes you see people who just really want to do the right thing, and people actually mock them and make fun of them and say, "Wow, what a goody two shoes! Look what a dorky kind of person." And I don't like that at all. If somebody's trying to do the right thing, if somebody really wants to do what's right, they shouldn't be mocked for that. You shouldn't make fun of them for that. You should say, well, good for you. You're trying to do what you believe in. And if you disagree with what they're doing, you can explain that. You can say, look, I appreciate that you're trying to do the right thing, but I want to tell you, maybe you should think about this, because maybe what you're doing is not the right thing. So you can kind of get them thinking in a different direction, but you shouldn't just mock them for being dorky, because what's wrong with being dorky? It means basically that you take things seriously. I don't see a problem with that. So I hope that our culture and our sort of set of social and media values can start to move in that direction again. Maybe not in the same way that it was in the 1950s, but at least in a sense where we can talk about our culture and our society in a meaningful way, without just making fun of people, without just kind of putting people down and making people targets for sarcastic sort of put downs. So I hope that we can move in that direction. I think that would be a good direction for us to move in. So thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for listening to my barrage of words as usual. Hope that everyone's doing well, and I will say bye-bye for now.